opening weekend of set championships was pretty fun, if you ask me. I finally got to get out of the house, get back into the dojo, play some cards. I really did have a great weekend. I came away with a win, picked up the champ Mac, picked up the Jafar. Was pretty awesome. But what I thought was most awesome is how good everything is in this metagame. I felt like everyone in the room had an honest chance to win that tournament. And really, if you look at the results from Ink Decks this past weekend, you can see that just about any deck you want to play probably has a chance. Any given set champs. Going to be a lot of fun. Let's get into some decks that I think are great for week 2. So here we are coming into the second week of set championships, and I think we can all agree there was a breakout deck coming from the last few weekends. And well, yeah, Emerald Amethyst discard, super good. But really what it's talking about is that Diablo might be the true, problem of the metagame in the coming weeks of Disney Lorcana set championships. So when you start looking at that, you say, hey, what changes to my deck do I have to make to kind of make sure I don't get buried by Diablo? Ruby decks, I think, have the most difficult time with this because they have to start playing cards that they really don't want to, while everything else kind of has a more free way to kind of enjoy through that. But nonetheless, I want to get into some decks today, start breaking down what I think you should be targeting in week 2 of set championships. So, of course, any given set champs is really just showcasing that all of these different decks are very good. If you really enjoy a particular archetype in Disney Lorcana, I think more than ever, you have the ability to be successful with it. Emerald, Amethyst, Sapphire, Steel, Ruby, they all have the tools to be successful in this game. Right now, I believe we are dominated by cards like Rhino and Sisu and Diablo, of course, but it's not to say that any one of these decks and these archetypes have the chance to be successful. So with that being said, I would love to know down below, did you do well in set championships this week? Did you do it with the rogue deck? I'm really curious to hear about those types of things. I really felt like I kind of went in with the rogue deck, even though it was successful last weekend. We're going to be talking about the deck that I did play. But in general, I just feel like right now, everything is on the menu. It really is. So let me know in the comments below how you did in your first week at set championships. So here's a list that I was able to win with this past weekend. Amber, Emerald, Discard. I did have, one loss on the day. I ended up losing to Emerald Steel Discard, played by Braden, who was on the channel a couple weeks ago discussing how much he loved this metagame. And I have to agree, it's been pretty fun so far, really getting back in, playing the game, being with the community, talking with the community, seeing the different results from different tournaments. So it was nice to say that I felt not obligated whatsoever to play any given deck. And with that is the reason that I brought Amber Emerald Discard. And what does this deck do? Kind of a little bit of everything. But in all honesty, on my run, I took down not 1, not 2, but 3 Amber Steel decks. And I really believe that Amber Steel Songs might be the best deck in the metagame in theory because it has the most free wins in the game. And when going first, it seems very difficult to really stop. But this deck was able to contend with it well. I think I went 6-1 in games against Amber Steel, only losing 1 game on the draw and picking up several victories on the draw as well. What I think this deck really does better than anything is protect Diablo. Having all of the discard package along with Bare Necessities and Ursula to really protect Diablo is a huge deal. The biggest concern is that there are even more Diablo decks. So out there, while you are a very good Diablo deck, you're not great into opposing Diablo decks. It's definitely a consideration moving forward of saying like, hey, do I really need Aladdin Prince Ali? Should I be playing some number of Sir Hiss? Is there other options like Cove and things like that? Like, what can we really do to kind of even out the Diablo wars that I definitely would not be shocked if you guys have seen many of this past weekend? Nonetheless, I wanted to share the deck that I was able to finish with and go undefeated and able to win my first set championships of the season. I'm pretty excited moving forward that I think that this deck, if you've ever played this deck before, it's not very different. The play styles are basically the same, and you just get to add a couple little cools. I will say the Lady Tremaine was an absolute tear. The Wicked Stepmother and the ability of Do It Again really did lock several opponents out of the game. So this is a card that I would not overlook one bit. I think it's very good in this deck, and it really just says and closes the door on opponents thinking that they have a chance to get back into the game. Once they see you do the first Lady Tremaine, kind of loop. They understand pretty quickly, and that's when I've seen a lot of concessions. So all in all, this deck is very, very fun, very, very sweet. And if you're looking for something different, I wouldn't call this, super meta whatsoever. I think it's a bit off meta. And if you want to really catch people off guard, going Prince Ali into Prince John, into the Muses, and then Kita Under the Sea can really just about remove everything in the game. Really, really fun. And again, shout out to Andre. If you want to hear more about this, definitely check out that interview that's on the channel. TFM is sponsored by Heavy Play. I want to take a quick moment to remind you that you can use the code in the description box below to check out a way to really upgrade your game. That's right, guys. This video is sponsored by Heavy Play. This is such a sweet deck box. I've been using it for months now, in all honesty. Have the idea to be magnetic, come out, bring in, fills plenty of dice, lots of room, lots of all that fun stuff. And of course, even the magnetic top. If you're looking to pick up a new deck box, I totally suggest this. Heavy Play is insane. Check out the description below for your link and a way to support TFM. The other deck that TFM was successful this past weekend, Ben picked up a win and a second place finish with this version of Amber Steel Songs. That's right, we brought back Grab Your Swords. And the question is, why? Well, when the entire metagame goes Emerald and starts hiding behind Prince Johns and Discard and Diablos, you kind of have to risk it for the biscuit. And the other big thing is that, in Ben's metagame, he's not experienced a ton of Ruby Sapphire decks. So the dead card that would be Grab Your Swords isn't as dead because in most of the matchups he's playing, the card's quite relevant. As you can see here, there's also 2 Naveen's in this list. This is a deck that Ben was able to top 8 the Pro Play Summit with a few weekends ago, and just kind of modifying it to his set champ's pleasure, understanding the rooms that he's playing in, and I think that's a real crucial thing. And when you start talking about those rooms that you're playing in, when you get a feel for your community, you understand what their kind of like decks are on average, you can really make choices like this. Grab Your Swords is not a card that's, really prominent in the metagame. But if you know your room, it's going to be focused on this Emerald Diablo train or this Discard Prince John train, or there's even more aggressive style decks in general. Grab Your Swords is a great addition. As the 2 of, you're always mulling it away, and you're just basically trying to set up a board to where when you play Ariel and find the grab Your Swords, you can sing it immediately, so that way you're not worried about getting Ursula'd and kind of losing it that way. All in all, it's just a nice little example of saying like, hey, set champs can be a different animal. If you know your community, you can really build and mend your deck to be successful in them. And that's exactly what Ben was able to do this past weekend, picking up a first place victory and a runner-up victory. It was pretty insane for Ben. So shout out to Ben, of course. And if you're looking to hear more about this, definitely join the Discord and hey, tag Ben. It was his birthday the other day. Happy birthday, Ben. The other deck that TFM found success with this past weekend, played by TFM Nunez to a win, TFM Orion to a top 4, and TFM Melissa to a top 4 as well in all of their respective set championships, was none other than Amethyst Emerald Discard. This deck has been on an absolute tear since the Pro Play Summit. Shout out to Jordan again for an incredible weekend with this deck and kind of just putting the limelight for everyone to understand. The coolest part about this deck is, I played some games with this list last weekend. I almost played this myself at set championships because the deck is so much fun. It really does have a ton to offer to the metagame. Understanding that right now we are in the Diablo Wars, so moving to a second Hidden Cove felt really correct. There is somewhat of an uptick, in cards like Iago. Peter Pan is another card that just feels so very good in the format. So really, this deck is just the epitome of just, hey, how many times can I play Diablo? How do I protect my Diablo? How do I answer opposing Diablos? And this deck does all of that fairly well. And it is drawn in by, of course, Prince John, who's one of the more prominent cards in Disney Lorcana right now. Every deck, really finding a way to utilize him well, hide behind the ward keyword because it's so very powerful, and then have that consistent draw engine for the low cost of 3 and, the uptick of many playable singable songs as well, or cards like Chip, all the more. But yeah, this deck, really, really fun. I also think that opposed to most of the decks, this is probably the one that you really don't need a ton of reps on. The deck kind of, it really does kind of play like in a straightforward aspect. So it's really nice and comfort pick for most players. A lot of the players that I've spoken to that were like Ruby Amethyst or Amethyst Steel players, I've kind of suggested saying like, hey, if you have Diablos, you should probably move to Diablos and really just start focusing on this type of list because Diablo is just so very powerful in the metagame. Nonetheless, shout out to TFM Nunes for picking up that win this past weekend with this deck. You want to hear more from him? Check out the Metafy. Ruby, Sapphire, Sharks. That's right. This deck is, one of the more prominent decks in the metagame. So how do we kind of keep it going? What are the sacrifices that we have to make in order to be successful in a more Diablo and aggressive minded metagame? Well, I've made the decision to kind of remove Carpet Bag. Personally, I feel like Ruby Sapphire has been underplayed at set championships, definitely in my area. So obviously, if this is not true for your area, then you probably need to be able to play, Carpet Bag still for the mirrors and things like that. But if you're seeing a more aggressive mindset, then these are some of the cards I think are kind of required. And specifically, if it's Diablo aggression, going back to adding 2 brawls to this deck and 1 Vanellope Von Sweets, her ability with Rush and Evasive the turn you play her is a really big deal. And it's definitely a card that most Emerald decks are not going to be expecting. They're not going to be familiar with. If they see, obviously, if they play Diablo on 1 and they see it in your hand, it's not ideal. But really what it's telling them is that you have an answer to their Diablo. So their Diablo isn't going to draw infinite cards. So adding a couple more answers is really nice. Brawl is a card that's been very difficult, I think, for this deck to play for quite some time, and most have completely cut it. But I feel like in order to even be able to get to the end game, you kind of just have to make sure your opponent doesn't have infinite resources when you do there. And really what I'm saying is it feels like you can get to the end game sometimes and be able to find that Shift Sisu or that Be Prepared. But the problem is that when you do it, they still have like 5 or 6 or 7 cards in their hand because of all the resources they've been able to gain through Diablo because you didn't have any answers to Diablo. So right now, I just think that in this type of metagame, specifically, a lot of the people that I've been talking to have said the uptick of Diablo was, like way up there. Then you just kind of need answers to it. So this was kind of my suggestions for it in general. All in all, this deck is still very good, very, very powerful. But I think you just have to respect, unfortunately, the really annoying green bird just a little bit more. Sapphire Amethyst, is it good enough? It's hard to say, but I did hear reports this past weekend of this deck finding success in the metagame, and that does make me excited because I do believe this is one of the cooler decks in the game. I think that you do, in theory, have the answers to Diablo in a big way. So if Diablo is the current issue, I think that this deck kind of preys on that. You're pretty favored into Emerald Steel. You're definitely favored into Amethyst Emerald. So because of those concepts and kind of like the way you can build this deck, you can even double down if you want. You can play the 4th Peter Pan, you can play the 4th Iago, and kind of like trim down some of the heavier numbers later on. But I did see a couple times this weekend Monstro really come in and kind of define a game. So with that being said, you're just looking for all these little additional answers. And I think the one card that for me, I just don't understand we haven't seen more of, and it seems like all the more reason to have it right now is an Ice Spikes. Ice Spike's ability to, exert down an opposing character and also lock down opposing items can really come up in specific matchups. But the idea that you can exert a character kind of on demand with your Tamatoa Happy as a Clam as well is just enough reason as me to easily have this as a one of that's not even necessarily a fun of. I think that on average, what I really like about set championships is that you have the ability to catch people off guard. And playing cards like Ice Spikes really can do that because your opponent might feel very safe, might make a particular play thinking they're going to be okay. And then all of a sudden you get to Ice Spikes and run your, Iago into a character. And then the next turn you're like, hey, I'm going to bell my Iago and banish another character. I think that you just really have the opportunity during set championships to be a little more creative and catch people off guard that are just kind of running off scripts for the most case. All in all, if you were successful with Sapphire Amethyst last weekend, I'd love to all in all, if you were successful with Sapphire Amethyst this past weekend, I would really love to know in the comments below. I think this is a really cool deck. It's a really fun deck. I played this in the set 7 set championships, but I haven't had time to pick it up and play it in set 8 yet. But I think, a lot of the theory around this deck is very good. It's just a matter of hey, how do I get through those first 5 turns? Once you're in turn 6 through 10, you're kind of winning the game in most cases. I think as long as you can find a way to get through those without taking, too much lore, giving too much lore to your opponent, and you can really manage the rest of the game, when you really look at this deck and you can understand, hey, I have 4 Hades, I have 4 Elsa, I have 2 Monstro, I have 3 Bell. You have a lot of answers 2 characters that are ready, and that is a big deal for closing out games. And all of a sudden, not to mention, most of those characters all have 2 lore to boot, so turning the game over, turning that table and then turning sideways to quest for 20, not that difficult when you really get control of the game. Speaking of Metafy, the coaching is up. I have been coaching nonstop these last couple days. We actually opened up the hours on the Metafy. So if you're looking to really secure a Jafar, try and put yourself in a position to win the event, definitely schedule a coaching session with myself or David Nunez. And of course, we also just added a gameplay coaching session as well. So if you're looking to really hone in on a particular matchup, then this is a way we can do it now. And I really am just looking to kind of span that horizon and saying, like, hey, we want to offer more to our students. And that is a perfect way to do it. So if you're looking to book a session, get it in. Let's get you a better chance to win a Jafar or a playmat at set championships. The number one question I get so very often right now is, where is Amethyst Steel? How is this deck successful? I think this is the deck that for a very, very long time, TFM has been mostly synonymous with. And I won't lie to you, I think that this deck is just too fair. I do think that it's a nice budget deck, and if that's what you've been playing and it's what you know very well, then I still suggest playing Amethyst Steel at your set championships because it's a deck that you're so in tune with and you know all the matchups. But I do think that on average, you're in a bit of a pickle because the deck is just not as powerful as most of the metagame is going on. But if you are looking to sweep, I do think that Yensin is currently the best version of this. I think you have the best matchup for this deck into Amber Steel. I think you have the best matchups into Ruby Sapphire items and things like that. I think that you have some game into the Diablo decks because you have Fire the Cannons, because you have Peter Pan. So I think that a lot of the things that you want to do and interact with all work well into the metagame. But the problem is that your average hands are just average, whereas most of the kind of game right now, their average hands are above average and they're doing really, really unfair things. And this deck just doesn't really do anything unfair aside from repeat. And it's even difficult right now to even commit, 4 snakes and 4 foxes to this deck to even really go to the distance and having that many peats. So all in all, while I think this deck is a contender and it's fine and it can certainly win any set championships, I do believe that you have to understand that going in, this is, definitely a tier 2 deck in this particular metagame, and you're really just preying on very specific matchups that you're, better into. But on average, if you're losing die rolls, it's not as super easy to just win with this deck on the draw as opposed to many other choices, specifically many other Amethyst choices that we've already covered in this video. So I love Brooms, I love Doc, I love Amethyst Steel, but it is very tough to say, like, hey, if you can play any deck in the game, I don't know that I'm really suggesting people to go play Amethyst Steel Brooms unless it's the only deck they're really invested in and they just want to feel comfortable playing a deck. Let's talk about a different type of deck and a different type of discard. I do really think that discard is very prominent in Disney Lorcana right now, and it comes in many forms. As we've seen earlier, the Prince John and Diablo decks were definitely all over the place, but Amber Steel still has a place to be within that metagame. Rob Serpay had a runner-up victory at Pro Play Summit, Texas, and I was able to kind of talk to him and discuss about his deck and really figure out, like, hey, moving into set championships, what are some of the changes that you would make? And the changes that he suggested to me were going up bare necessities and adding a smash. The third bare necessities just really removes problematic cards that are very annoying for you to play against, and it also kind of shores up some of the more annoying matchups in general, removing, the songs from your opponent posing Amber Steel songs decks, removing the Emerald Steel songs from that matchup, even removing cards like Friends on the Other Side, Finders Keepers from Amethyst decks are kind of a big deal. Obviously, against Ruby Sapphire, removing any ramp or removing the workshop, any of those things also hits pretty well. The other idea about Daisy Duck is that while she was very, catch you off guard in Texas, and that's the reason why Rob played so many, he felt that whenever he drew more than one copy, it was really, really like not where he wanted to be. But he understood that just on the occasion, playing Daisy like Emerald plays Chip is still pretty good in this metagame and can really put your opponent in some awkward positions and choices. So having the Daisy, having the 3 bare necessities, and having the You Have Forgotten Me's all kind of double down on this format of like, hey, A lot of people are cheating resources early, and you can catch them with their hand in the cookie jar and really punish them for having low resource hands when they don't respect you. A lot of times this deck opens up like an Amber Steel aggro deck. So when you open up like an aggro deck, your opponent is trying to fend that off. And then all of a sudden, if you turn into this mid-range discard deck in the mid game, you can really set your opponent far behind and kind of just take over the game because of that. Smash is just an attribute to saying like, hey, having one more inkable answer to Diablo, having an answer to Ursula 3, having an answer to opposing aerials, like this card does represent a lot, even though it is a bit slow on average, and you can kind of hope that you do this without that. Just an idea of saying like, hey, one more inkable card that on average my opponent cannot remove from my hand is a big deal, and it really does remove a lot of problematic characters. Shout out to Rob. Hopefully you guys can enjoy him. He's going to be on the stream tonight. If you want to check him out, do not miss that stream, 8:30 p.m. EST start. Myself, Dick Burns, Rob Serpay, and even the great Habibi will be on tonight. And of course, the last form of discard, let's not forget the one, the only, Bend to My Will. That's right, this is a deck that we really did make popular back in the Azerite C metagame when we took it to the North American Continental Championship and all found a lot of success with it in the competitive side events and the revival event. Well, I'm here to tell you that this deck is back, and there's a big shout out to Joseph Quigley. He finished 20th at PPG Summit, Texas in the 10K with this list, and he really has enjoyed it. He has consistently been upgrading it and really just adding more and more to it. For me, my additions so far to this list are Kita. I really just want to be able to live in a world where I can play a Muses and a Kita and have at any given time the ability to go and find Under the Sea. I think it's very important to be able to play a card like Under the Sea in the format right now for this deck into a lot of the aggressive angled concepts. But this deck, like no other, just when it plays Bend to My Will, the game kind of ends. Your opponents just are stuck on nothing, and they're really just trying to hit a panic button to survive. But the biggest card for this deck, and really the most interesting, is Basil. Basil, the Undercover Detective, is a 7-cost inkable, 5 strength, 4 willpower, 2 lore, with 2 abilities. Incapacitate. Whenever you play this character, you may return chosen character to their player's hand, and also Interfere. Whenever this character quests, chosen opponent discards a card at random. Basil is one of the more dominant cards in this deck, and it's really, really annoying to play against. But because of the way your deck is designed and having Clarabelle, having these bounce back potential, kind of just being more and more annoying, this just only adds to it. But what it also double downs on is the ability to quest for 2, and then all of a sudden you're making your opponent discards cards at random. So maybe you have a crazy line where you get to Mother's Knows Best and then simply quest and discard, which is great. But you also could just play cards like You're Welcome, get rid of things that way. You can all of a sudden start bouncing cards with Muses. Like whenever you sing a song, you can bounce a card back and then quest with Basil and then remove the card that way. It just creates this like pseudo lock similar to the Amber Emerald versions, but Amber Emerald really can't afford to get to 7 ink on average, so they can't play this card. But since this deck is playing How Far I'll Go, playing Tipo, playing Sail, it very easily gets to that 7 resources in play and that 7 ink to be able to play this card. Of course, this deck is also featuring a Lady Tremaine, similar to the Amber Emerald deck as well. It really is just about locking your opponent out. I think the biggest problem for most of these decks, in all honesty, is this concept of once you kind of remove all of your opponent's resources, you get rid of everything in play, you get rid of their hand, it's very difficult on average for players to just concede in this game. So you kind of need this way to say like, hey, how do I just win the game? And when they see this repeat effect, like what Basil offers, like what Lady Tremaine offers, you just understand quickly. Your opponent just realizes like, you know what? I actually cannot win this game. So since I can't win this game, I should concede. And it's really what this deck and, other discard decks in the format kind of need from opponents. So, when you're playing in a more set championship, more casual crowd, a little bit more uneducated than the competitive crowd, where we had seen a lot of concessions early on stream at the Pro Play Summit. This is a little different where players just don't fully understand that they even can concede. You're not allowed to ask them if they can concede. So when you show them, cards like Basil, cards like Lady Tremaine, the loops with We Don't Talk About Bruno and things like that, they figure it out. They're like, oh wait, like there's just no way I can get back in the game. So that's really what Basil does for this deck more than anything. And I really think it's a good card that has flown a little bit under the radar in the first like 6 weeks of this meta game. So if you are a Baja believer and you really just want to ruin your opponents and just be toxic, I think that this deck is definitely a deck that you can take to a set championships. Without a doubt, pick up a Jafar, and maybe with a little luck along the way, you can probably pick up that win as well. But all in all, shout out to Joe Quigley for kind of finally re-putting the limelight back on this deck. Do not forget to check out the Metafy, the Tips for All, and the Amethyst Steel guide are the premier guides over there. We also have several other guides with finance guides. We have some older guides from Azurite Sea, from the Arceus Islands. If you're just looking to pick up some free information, there is a ton of it over on the Metafy. But the Tips for All video just recently got a meta gaming article added to it by TFM Nunez. Really talks about playing the rock. And what he really was trying to say is that, listen, you walk into a room and you can see your set championships. You know the people there. You know what they're playing. If you have the ability to build multiple decks like David Nunez did, he had Ruby Sapphire built. He had, Amethyst Emerald built, and he had Amber Steel Songs built. On average, he would play Amber Steel Songs because he thinks it's the best deck in the game. But if you look at the room and you see the room is mostly Ruby Sapphire, all of a sudden Diablo starts looking more and more enticing. That was the decision that he made this past weekend, and he ended up winning that set championship. So it's really just the concept of like, hey, if you're looking for some free insight, then the Disney Lorcana Foundation's video or article that we have over on the Metafy right now is just talking you through how you can plan for your metagame. All in all, thank you guys so much for watching today. If you want to set championships this weekend, if you top 8 this past weekend, hit me up in the comments. Let me know so I can congratulate you personally. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. It is really fun to set championships. Being able to get back out there, play games with the community is all I really, really wanted for this set championships, since last one was really during a hectic and busy time of my life, and I really had to sadly ignore Disney Lorcana for during the Arceus Island set championships. It's really nice that I can go out and play in this one. So hopefully I get to see some of the local community near me in the Philadelphia area at a set championships. If you are local and you haven't yet, and you haven't met me, definitely come up, introduce yourself, say hello. Again, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you like these decks. If you do, definitely share them with your friends. Hit that like button for me. If you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe. With that, make sure you check out the next video live stream tonight. See ya.